Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Brian, and today we're gonna actually be building something. Not a camping video, but I think this is gonna be beneficial to the camping crowd because you can use what I'm about to build possibly in an RV and a truck camper. It's basically a solar power station that I'm gonna try to build. I've never built one of these before. I'm hoping I don't blow myself up or catch anything on fire, but you guys are gonna tag along with me to watch it if it does happen. REDODO sent this giant battery to me and I had a hard time turning it down, and I thought what better use for a giant battery like this, since I don't have an RV, than to hook it up to an inverter and build a solar power station in the event that, you know, power goes down at the house, or you can take this idea and put it into your RV or to your camper. Here we have this giant REDODO 12.8 volt 200 amp hour plus battery. This is a LIFEPO4 battery. This thing is a beast. If you're familiar with the Zooms battery, this is the same battery, just an upgraded version of it, and they've kind of rebranded it to REDODO. This thing has got incredible reviews on it. That's why I accepted to take it, because I don't want some cheap, nasty battery that's literally gonna blow up on me. Just a quick few specs. Again, 200 amp hours. The energy this thing puts out is 2,560 watt hours. This thing uses grade A LiPo4 cells inside it, so it's high quality cells inside this unit. It does have a BMS. It's going to detect over voltage protection. It's got over discharge protection, overcharge protection, thermal protection. It's got a lot of smarts built into this that's going to protect the battery if someone like me screws it up. It also does come with a 5-year warranty on this thing, and it's rated up to 4,000 cycles before you start to see a degradation in the actual cells. So if you guys can use this thing for 4,000 cycles, I'm pretty sure you're going to get your money's worth. With that, this is going to be the heart of the unit that I'm going to build. So I'm going to show you what else I had to buy in order to build this power station, in case you guys are thinking about doing the same thing. So let me get this battery out of the way. Here I've got a 30 amp inline fuse. I've got some 3/4 inch grommet holes that I'm going to use. Battery monitor with a shunt from QWORK, QWORK, and it's just going to be able to help me monitor the battery status. I got 25 feet worth of 8-gauge wire. I've got some really heavy duty 2-gauge wire that came installed with lugs already. I'm going to probably swap these out for some copper lugs. Battery lug crimpers for doing all my wiring. Real heavy duty cable cutters. I didn't have these. I have a lot of wire cutters, but I didn't have any cutters that really could cut this 2-gauge stuff or this 8-gauge. 8-gauge 5/16 copper lugs, 2-gauge 5/16 copper lugs, a 200 amp inline fuse. I also got some positive and negative bus bars. Instead of having to wire everything to one single post on the battery or the inverter, I'm going to kind of run everything through these bus bars. Got an Ampeak, and I'm just using a 1200 watt inverter right now. This system should be able to be upgradable, but right now I'm thinking 1200 watts is going to be more than enough to power my fridge if my power goes out or whatever. So I've got this 1200 watt inverter from Ampeak, and that's going to be what I'm going to use to convert DC to AC. The first step in this process is I'm going to, again, build this thing kind of in a rolling cart. So I've got some 3/4 inch plywood that I'm going to rip down, basically construct a box that this battery is going to fit on the bottom shelf, and then I'm going to create another shelf and probably put the inverter on top of that, because I want the battery cables to be as short as possible. I don't want long battery cables. So the inverter is going to sit on top of this, and then probably another shelf where I'm going to do all the wiring and install everything. But that's just what's in my head. I don't know if that's how it's going to play out. Okay folks, so this is just a kind of a mock-up so far of what I've got. And I have this of course on rollers, but here's where the big battery unit's gonna sit. I've got the inverter somewhat mounted to where I think I'm gonna put it, and I've got all the other things that I know that I'm gonna need minus the charge controller. I'm waiting on that to arrive. You know, I've got my 2 bus bars, I've got my shunt for my battery monitor that I've got right here, and then I have my 200 amp inline fuse that has got to go up here somewhere. Okay, so I've got the battery. I'm just kind of laying out some wires. The terminals are covered with plastic, so I'm hoping that's going to be safe. But I'm trying to figure out exactly how I'm going to route all these wires. So I have this power coming from the battery. I'm going to tie it into a fuse block, but I've got to cut it. So I'm going to use my cable cutters, and I've marked it to where I need to cut it and to where I need to strip it so the lug fits on it just in the right spot to fit on this fuse holder. So now, battery to a fuse, inline fuse to the positive bus bar. So I'm going to measure how big I need to make this little jumper cable. Oops. So that's going to fit just like that, and I'm going to mark it. So hopefully I can get the crimp where it needs to be. There we go. Little jumper cable. And put some heat shrink on it. I'm going to get as much of this stuff wired up as I can. It's just basic wiring. When I'm done with everything, I will slowly walk you guys through how I connected everything and where everything goes, you know, to maybe give you guys a better idea of how I'm doing it, and then we'll go from there. So. Well, it's been a few days and I have this thing finished now. You can see I kind of built it on a rolling cart type platform so I can easily move it. And I did put a top on it, but let me take this off so I can show you guys the workings of this a little better. But in a nutshell, and I'll bring you in closer, this is it right here. So I've got my REDODO 200 amp hour plus battery, basically the heart of this unit. I've got my Ampeak 1200 watt pure SINE inverter. I've got my Victron 7715 MPPT solar charge controller. I've got a couple of inline fuses. I've got my battery monitor shunt. I've got my positive and negative bus bars. I've got a QWORK battery monitor display. That's what's connected to this shunt, and just some 2 gauge and 8 gauge wire. And this was kind of built a little more complicated than what I probably anticipated. I will be building another one of these with a 100 amp hour battery that's going to kind of eliminate a bunch of the bus bars and probably even the solar charge controller. So if you like this setup, I will be building another one that's a lot more simple to wire up here coming up in the next few weeks. But let me bring you folks in closer to kind of show you up in detail the wiring and how everything is connected, and then we'll do a actual startup. Okay, so coming off of the positive battery terminal, I've got a 2 gauge wire coming up through this shelf with a rubber grommet going into a 200 amp inline fuse, then coming out with more 2 gauge to one terminal on the positive bus bar. I've got another terminal on the positive bus bar coming out to another inline fuse, then connecting to the positive side of the inverter. So that's my positive side. My negative side up underneath is just coming directly from my negative post on my battery. That 2 gauge wire is coming up through another hole and then coming out directly to the QWORK battery shunt on one side. The other side of the shunt, I just created a short little jumper wire, and that's going from one side of the shunt directly to the negative bus bar. On another terminal on the negative bus bar, I've got just a little 6-inch wire, 6-inch 2 gauge wire coming from that directly to the negative side of my inverter. So that's basically could power this thing. The rest is optional if you want to add solar. So to add solar, to do that, I got my Victron Smart MPPT 7515 that I bought controller. I've got the negative battery side coming from the negative battery side on the controller directly to the negative bus bar. I've got the positive side coming up to a 30 amp inline fuse on one end, and it's coming out, and I have it connected to a terminal on the negative bus bar. That's it. Then for the PV or solar inputs, then you got negative and positive, red and black obviously, and that is just your solar cables that I attached to here, and I have them just kind of pigtailed up, and they're going to terminate right here, and this is where you're going to actually hook in your solar panels. Okay, now for the actual QWORK battery monitor right here, 2 1/8 inch hole that I drilled, and this just fits right in, and this is going to monitor your battery capacity and your voltage, and it's just a simple setup. It basically comes pre-wired. So here's all the wiring that goes from this controller directly to this shunt, and I just have it laying on top of the battery right now, but it's coming up through this grommet, and it connects, it comes pre-installed with a plug. You just connect it directly to that shunt, and then you do have to provide your own. This is a little 22 gauge wire, and this is simply the wire that's going to power the screen on this monitor, but you have to attach it. There's a little hole underneath for the power side of it, of this wire. You put that wire in and tighten down a screw, and I have this little 22 gauge wire wrapping around, and it's just connected up to one of the positive side of one of the positive bus bars. So this is what's powering the LED screen, and that is it, guys. I mean, it's really not complicated, and most of you guys probably know this, and probably a lot of this is overkill with all the inline fuses and whatnot. So I will be building another one that's not quite as eccentric, I guess, as this one. But if you really want to know everything about it, one of these pieces, check out Will Prowse. He just is pretty much known for DIY solar units, so he's got a great channel that has a lot of information. Let's show you guys what this thing does. So to turn this thing on, you just turn the on button on the inverter, and you'll hear the fans kick on, and that inverter's on now. Now to prove it, and this is on locking caster, so let me lock these up. Let me just grab a fan real. So we're just gonna plug this fan in, turn it on high, and I've got up to 1200 running watts off of this particular inverter. I apologize for the shakiness, but I'm hand holding this. So this is the QWORK battery monitor, and this, you can see it's 100%, and the voltage is 13.32, and I like to keep it on battery percentage really, and that arrow pointing down means that there is power being used. That's basically the simple setup for this. Let me put you back on the tripod. Okay folks, I know the lighting's terrible in here, but I had to cut the garage. I'm gonna take this thing outside now, and I'm gonna hook up a 120 watt solar panel to it. And so you can see the actual app that comes with this Bluetooth Victron smart controller. This thing's really, probably, in my opinion, at least all the reviews and research that I've done, this is probably one of the better smart controllers to use. And what's great about this unit is that you can scale this down, you can scale it up, you can put this inside your truck camper if you want. The only thing is, these inverters are a little loud because they do have an internal fan in them, and it keeps running to keep them cool. But you can take this setup and kind of make it your own and build your own little cabinet to put inside your truck camper, use inside your RV unit, take, you know, to your tent camping if you're gonna be there for a week. You know, this thing probably weighs maybe 50, 60 pounds total, but it's on casters, so it's easy to move around. So you can kind of take this idea and go with it and kind of conform it to whatever you need. But I built this mainly in the event that we ever have power go down, and I can plug this into my chest freezer that I have in the garage. That's gonna be the next video. I'm gonna see how long this thing will run my chest freezer, because we did have power go out a couple of weeks ago, and I actually had to take out everything out of my fridge and put it in my little 12-volt coolers that I have until we could get power back on. So this was mainly built for an emergency use situation if the power goes down and I can still keep my freezer cold. Let's take this outside now and hook up some solar panels to it. And I'm going to be using my favorite Elecanta 120 watt panel that you folks still have the chance to win if you go back and look at my video for when I camped in a subscriber's house. This is still up for grabs, but it's a 120 watt panel. Use this to test. And this isn't going to be at the perfect angle of the sun right now, but so the solar panel comes with this 10-foot DC cable, and I just attached these solar panel pigtails to it. It comes with the solar panel. Just connect that, And then I'm already sweating, I apologize. And then these connect directly to these pigtails that I installed on this thing already. So we're gonna plug these in. And that is now connected to this unit. And I will pull up my app that comes with this Victron and show you guys what it's doing right now. Okay, so I'm gonna go into the Victron Smart Controller app. I'm gonna connect it. And it's not gonna be pulling anything in right now because this smart controller, well, it's actually pulling in 86 watts. So this is pulling in 86 watts worth of solar power right now. And again, that's amazing out of this panel because the sun's low, it's very hazy outside, and this is only rated at 120 watts, the panel is. So that's pretty good. I'm not gonna hook this up to my little chest freezer because that thing's only gonna pull maybe 60 to 70 watts. This hairdryer on low, I know gets me around 500 watts. I didn't build this system to run over 1,000 watts. I don't need it to do that. I've got some giant generators if I need to. Let me turn on the inverter and we'll power this guy. Turn the inverter on. Works just fine. This would easily power or run your refrigerator or freezer in the event of an emergency, which is again why I built this unit. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and cut my inverter off, unplug it. So gang, this is a really simple, easy way to kind of build your own emergency power station, if you want to call it that. If you have some of the supplies, you can always get the power stations like I have, and you've seen me do a lot of reviews on them. But I thought this would be fun. I had the battery. REDODO sent me the battery. I thought, let's build this. It'll be a good time. So I did it. I'm glad I did. I'm just going to keep it in the garage in the event that I ever need it. Again, 2,560 something watt hours out of this battery would run that freezer for days on end if I ever needed to, or my refrigerator, or lights, or if my wife needs to do her hair in an emergency, she can blow her hair. So I just thought it was a fun idea, and I wanted to give you folks the idea of how you could go about building this. Again, I'm a brand new novice at doing these things. There are probably a few things on this that I should have tweaked, but my first go around, I'm happy with it. And again, stay tuned because I will be building another one a little bit more simple than this and a little bit smaller footprint with a 100 amp hour battery. So stay tuned for that. So folks, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Take care.